Hey everyone, I'm Tom and welcome to the channel. Today we are going to be talking about book 5 of Malazan Book of the Fallen, Midnight Tides. And before we get too far into Midnight Tides itself, I want to talk about my Malazan journey in totality. This isn't really like a straightforward review or anything, but I just kind of wanted to talk about my experience with this book and Malazan so far. I know this is such a beloved book by so many people out there, or not even just a book, series, everything. This is one of those pinnacle series that people hold up and talk about as being one of the best of the best. And I think I'm having, I don't want to call it a overly unique experience with the series, but I do think it is different than a lot of people who I watch here on BookTube and people I talk with about books than a lot of experiences compared to what they're having. I think I'm having a much different experience. So let's go ahead and start with the beginning. Started Garden of the Moons, I guess, over a year ago now, maybe 2 years ago. And I really liked that book. I thought it was a really great introduction to the world. I was intrigued by the magic and the characters and just everything that's going on. It starts out in just like a magnificent way with that first battle that you get introduced to and just like what's going on. It's this great, there's also this like eerie epicness to it throughout. So I had a really good time with that book and I gave it 4 stars. Then we move on to Dead House Gates. And Dead House Gates was a much more mixed bag for me. I actually really liked the first like 25% and the last 25% of Dead House Gates. And it's that middle section that just did not work for me at all. I ended up giving that book a 3 star, but with the caveat that like the ending of that book, the Chain of Dogs is one of the best things I've probably ever read. The further and further I get away from that book, the more praise I have for it, especially that ending sequence. It's just one of those things that just kind of like lives in my head. And so, I think that is just one of the best things I've read. And so when I say that about a book, it just tells you how big of a lull I had in that middle section. Then we get to Memories of Ice, and Memories of Ice is my favorite of the Malazan books I've read so far. Spoiler, it is not Midnight Tides, but I just thought that book brought in so many elements from the first two and did everything better with big epic stuff and just all this great cool stuff happening inside of Memories of Ice. And I really thought at that point I was becoming a hardcore Malazan fan. I thought I could see what people were talking about. Not that I was going to probably be my favorite series, but it was at least on a trajectory of being very positive for me. And then we get to House of Chains, which is book 4. And I didn't even make a video for House of Chains. I really did not enjoy my time with that book whatsoever. And one thing I want to say about anything negative I have to say about the series is I don't think this is a bad series whatsoever. I don't think there's been a bad book. There have just been elements and parts of these books that did not work for me. For example, in House of Chains, that first book, book 1 of House of Chains, I really liked. Especially after riding the high of Memories of Ice, as we come into House of Chains, and I read book 1, which is Karsa's story for the most part. I really thought, I was like, okay, I'm in. I see what people are talking about. Like, we're really starting to get there. And then the rest of that book happened, and it was one of my least favorite books I read last year. I read that, I think, in February of last year, and it took me about a year to want to get back to Malazan. That's how much I disliked that book. And like I said, it's one of those things where when I look at it, I try to be objective. And I'm not an objective person, and I don't think you should try to be objective when you're reading. This is, especially for me, this is like a fun hobby. I'm not really trying to be like overly objective and like critique things from a place I don't think I can come from. I just did not have a lot of enjoyment from from House of Chains. And so then we get to finally Midnight Tides. And I know that was a long preamble for me to talk about this book, but I feel like I said, this is more of a discussion of my Malazan journey in totality. And I would really like to hear people's opinions down in the comments on what you would do if you were in my position or what you think I should do going forward. So for most of Midnight Tides, I thought I was having a good time, probably up until about the 60% mark. There were definitely problems I had with it earlier on. And it's funny, I was talking with Shay from Zachary Shay a lot when I was reading this. And one of the things that bothered me a lot in the beginning actually grew on me as the story went on. So there's a lot of humor and a lot of sexual humor in this book. And one, I don't think I was like prepared for that. One, it being sexual humor and just the amount of humor. Not that there hasn't been humor in the series up until this point. It just felt totally different than what I was expecting coming into this book. And very early on, I didn't think it was funny at all. There's multiple characters who I feel like sex is like this big joke. And there's a lot of like weird things, like people listening to people at brothels and just like constantly it's the only thing they think about. And I just felt I don't know, it just felt awkward, clunky, out of place for me personally. And funny enough, by the end of this book, I thought I like warmed up to it a little bit, and I thought it was like I got a couple chuckles out of it. But for so much of it, it bothered me. But still, up until that point, I was having a good time. I was really interested in one storyline more than the other. I wasn't as much interested in what was happening in the city at the time as what was happening with the brothers. I was much more invested in that. So there's this kind of like stark, like we would switch point of views, and I would just kind of like be so apathetic about the city storyline compared to the brothers. And then as the story kept progressing and progressing, that apathy kind of just spread to everything. And I think it's happened somewhere about, like I said, the 65% mark, where I had just been having like a good solid time. Up until that point, I was like, this is a 3-star book. It's good. It's not blowing me away or anything, but it's fine. It's not like offensively bad or anything like that. Like I said, none of these have been. And then I don't know what happened, but whatever had clicked kind of completely unclicked. And I just did not care about anything that was happening in this book. I don't know if that's more of a me thing, if it was the story, if maybe I needed to just take a break from this book and come back to it later instead of just kind of like pushing on, which is normally what I do. Like, this isn't a unique thing. It's not like I treated this book any differently than I treat other books. I just kind of read a book all the way through, and that's it. That's what happens. And so we just kind of got to this point where we're going through and I just don't care. And so when this like big climactic stuff happens at the end of this book, the only thing I could think of about was like, oh, I'm almost done, which is not the experience I was hoping to get from this. So I don't know what that means. So I will say this. It means I gave this book a 2-star. So that's 2 stars in a row. But it's funny, I enjoyed this one immensely more than House of Chains. So while House of Chains made me not want to continue with the series, but I said I would anyway, this book didn't make me want to not continue. If anything, I'm still very much interested in continuing on with the series, which I feel is a little bit funny because I feel like I'm being pretty negative about this because I did give it 2 stars because I just, in the end, didn't care. I didn't really enjoy my time with it. But there is still something about this series where I'm like, I mean, I can kind of see it sometimes. Especially when I think back to some of those earlier books that I really enjoyed. I'm like, I know it's in there. I know there are parts of this that I do like. It's just, is it this one book? And I do think one thing with Malazan, and this is just me talking and trying to come up with things on my own sometimes, is each one of these books, not that they feel completely unique from the other books in the series, but they do in a sense at the same time. And so I do just think it's this weird culmination of a story that has this massive through line that I don't even think I can understand where all of these individual books fit in together until I read everything. At least that's kind of what I think. And so I guess in totality, I'm saying I didn't have a great time with this book, but in a weird way, I'm still having a good time with the series. I've just had 2 bad books in a row. I don't know when I'm going to read Bone Hunters, but right now I'm still very committed to reading it at some point. It might not be till much later in this year. It might not even be till next year. But it's such a weird experience to have 2 back-to-back books that I didn't really have a great time with. But there's still something about this series that I want to keep going. Maybe that means I won't even like Bone Hunters. I don't know. I heard people say this is their favorite Malazan book. I've heard people say they think it's kind of dull. And so I obviously I'm in the camp of it being kind of dull. But I don't know what to expect going forward. I don't know, should I go forward? If you were me, would you keep going forward? Would you keep trying this? Because like I said, there's these seeds in here that I'm like, oh, I'm interested. I'm very much interested in what's going on with the cripple god and like all the things he's doing, this planning and the magic here. There's characters that weren't really prevalent in this book, but are in previous books that I want to see what happens in the future. And so it's just this weird web of confusion for me as a reader because I've never had a series like this where I'm not pushing on, but I'm continuing on this deep into a series. Because let's be honest, if you read that Bone Hunters is book 6 out of 10, you only have a couple left. Like, you might as well just kind of finish it. But I'm also not hate reading it. I don't want people to think that either, because I don't hate it. My enjoyment for some of these books has just been less. One thing I'm considering is changing how I read these books. One is basically just doing a chapter a day, because I think there's normally 24, 25 chapters in these books, something like that. They're between an hour or so long. What if I just do like one a day and try to like really hyper focus on what I'm doing, just dedicate time to it. And that means it's going to take me longer to read, which isn't a problem. That's one thing I have thought about and considered. And then I do think one thing that did actually help my enjoyment of this book is talking to people about it. And so, yeah, I don't know. This isn't like a review. This is just kind of my journey with Malazan so far. That might be the title of this video, actually, now that I'm sitting here thinking about it. But yeah, I would just kind of love to hear what your thoughts were of the series up until this point. Did you think it gets better, worse? What parts of it did you like, didn't like? Obviously, try not to spoil anything for the future for me, but I'm just curious on what other people felt at this point, because for me, it's this weird, I don't even want to say distaste. It's this weird, like, I want to keep going, even though I haven't enjoyed the most two recent books I've read. I just still have this hope that it's going to get back to a Memories of Ice or a Gardens of the Moon, which, like I said, I really liked those books. So yeah, that has been a very rambly video. Definitely let me know what you think of all this down below in the comments. I'm sure there's some Malazan fans who are just going to be super annoyed and probably tell me I should just stop reading it, which is maybe fair. Maybe I should just stop. I don't know. But I'd love to hear all of that down in the comments, or as always in the Discord that is linked in the description. But that is going to be all for me. And remember to read what you want when you want.